I'm not sort of used to this kind of public speaking. Just to couple things. I'm what you call a recovering public servant, and so when I sort of say the word we, if it's in the past, then I had something to do with it, or what we've done with the city. When I said we in the future as a city, then that's a mistake, because I cannot really tell you what the city is going to do in the future. The other part that I would like to start with, when Charles mentioned his $13 billion budget about 18 years ago, or whenever it was, and excuse my call, in 2004 or 2005, the provincial auditor issued a report on childcare in Ontario. It was a very scathing report. It was not nice at all. And the main problem was there is no accountability in the system. Licensing is done by untrained staff who know nothing about early education and childcare, because they license everything from group homes to God knows what. And then there's no curriculum. So that is how little has changed up to 2005. Since then we've seen lots of change, and it's continuing on. So what I want to talk briefly about, I'm not sure what this little thing is doing on the bottom there. I will talk about sort of what the operating criteria of the city is, how it came into being, sort of briefly the structure, how we actually measure quality, what's going on and what kind of development we plan, benefits, and finally I want to put my own spin on that, because in Ontario, as you're aware, it's the municipal governments who actually manage the child care system very, and I think that is a crucial part of what's going on in the future. So, what is it? The city's operating criteria is actually just one of the several tools that the city uses for managing the child care system. It doesn't stand alone, and it's part of city's expectations for child care programs, and that includes accountability for finance, that includes accountability for administration, and the quality of the program. The operating criteria also are advice to parents what their expectations should be. That's why the results of the criteria visits to the programs actually get posted inside the child care centers, and that's why, in fact, we ended up putting them on the web. There is a hierarchy that sort of within the planning process. There is the policy, which comes both from the province and from the city. There's our service plans that get renewed every few years. One just is in front of the city council, and then there is the operating criteria. Now the fact is that it actually works both ways. How we develop service plans and how we push the policy up to the council is very much affected by what the consultants see when they visit the child care centers and what kind of feedback they provide. I wonder if I can kill this little. Now that doesn't look like at all what I get in front of me. I hate Microsoft. What do I do? What have I done? Oh God. Okay. Next slide. I'm locked in the Microsoft hell. In the city, being a money conscious in the child care side, we don't use Microsoft for very little. We are running open systems, running Linux. Those of you who know Open Office and all that, it's free, and it works better obviously than Microsoft. So I am confused what's happening here. Oh, okay. Okay. So let me. You don't have to see the part that I'm going to tell you next about. And that is about the origins of the operating criteria. sort of the history of childcare and childcare funding in the city was that childcare subsidies, which right now sort of accounts to $250 million a year, and the whole system is close to $400 million, started essentially in municipally operated childcare centers. In 1970s, when the expansion of the system came, the city got into a purchase of service arrangements with community-based operators, both non-profit and commercial. And there was suddenly a need to develop criteria for how we pay them, and how we account for the money, how we account for the kids going in there. So there's a whole amount of essentially financial accountability. Over the years, I think you got it. Oh. Maybe we kill it. I want to screw it on my own by my followers. I'm going to have problems too. Anyway, so over the time, in the 1980s, we ran into problems and issues of low quality of programs in high-need areas. And how we noticed that the city staff who were going in and ensuring the financial accountability suddenly noticed that, in fact, the care is much lower in some areas of city than in other areas of the city. So then suddenly we get into, we need to help these programs. Okay? The intent of whatever the city was doing always was how we help the programs to become better. This is not about rewarding programs, this is not about closing programs, because especially in the high needs area of the city, the programs were delivered by primarily commercial operators. And although we might not like commercial operators, the fact is that we were not able to replace them. So this is going to back as how do we help to improve the quality of the programs for the children. So the primary purpose of everything we do is to support children, families, and communities. The city is not necessarily in business of supporting childcare operators. We're not in the business to run the business, we're in the business for children and families. It became to the point where it was necessary to interpret the DNA. What does it mean that you need to have sufficient toys? So, after much discussion about the staff, somebody decided that we need to have two toys per staff, for example. So there is a need to actually put interpretation. And again, it's in order to ensure the consistency of treatment of everyone. Ooh. I'm going backwards. Okay, let me talk about the structure of the operating criteria. We have a different operating criteria for different types of programs. The licensed childcare centers, I said, was developed first and is certainly the most mature. There are now criteria for special needs agencies, home childcare, family resource programs. They are in various stages of implementation and ongoing development. The city criteria are also used in the ARC programs, which is a really recreation-based program for school-age children right by the city. Every change in the criteria, the ongoing development is done in consultation with the childcare community, and it's tested before release. Doesn't mean that we accept all the input in there, but it's certainly considered. So I know this looks very long, but these are essentially the sections of the criteria, and everything that I sort of tagged, the factual stuff you find on the city's website, and I'll point you to it. But generally, a criteria, in this case, I'm going to talk mainly about the childcare centers, has several sections. There's always an introduction, which is important because it explains what we're trying to achieve and how we actually measure and how do we interpret the documents. Then there are the age-specific criteria for the 4 age groups, and that in fact is the stuff that Dr. Perlman was testing. There's a section on playground, administration, nutrition, financial criteria is fairly new. Working together is really a result of the First Duty project, and the sort of moving ahead is how the child care center fits in the community, in the school. And the appendices, the ever important appendices, because that's where the clarification and the glossary now sits. That will tell you that if you mean some, it means more than one. You know, that kind of stuff, which is really important for interpretation. Okay, so generally when people talk about quality, they identify the two kinds or two components, essential components. One of them is the structural components, and the other one would be the process component of the quality. The structural components are measured primarily in the administration section, not fully, but primarily. That's where you talk about the ratios, the proportion of full-trained staff, and the evidence and use of curriculum. The process components are found primarily within the individual age group sections, and they're the ones that you finally, or that data is the stuff that is published on the city's website, and at the current time, it's published as an aggregate of rooms within the center. So all the preschool centers, all the preschool rooms within the center are added together. That might be something that should change, and we can talk about later. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but this is what you actually see once you access the data. Essentially, there are 6 components to every age group criteria. There's a total of somewhere between 34 and 36 questions. The main are, you see the activities, experiences, physical environment, learning, physical needs, health and safety and interactions. The scoring is on a scale from 0 to 4, or I guess 1 to 4. You must achieve 3 in order to meet the city standard. Okay, and what you see when you sort of log in, and I purpose blacked out the name of the center, although you can search that and it would be public information. It shows you what the rating was in 2008 and the current rating in 2009. Shows you what the center's average is and what the city average. So you instantly see how the center itself is doing against the rest of the city. If you drill down, and I drill down right at the top, it will tell you activities and experiences, and it will show, the reason I'm doing this is to show you 2 additional things, is when a score is below 3, okay, that can result in many actions. If it's really bad, if it's health and safety related, children at risk and so on, there is might be an immediate sanction in terms of not admitting any more children to the centers, and city staff together with licensing staff may go on. But in any case, there is the last 2 columns, which say action reported by and action verified. There is actually say, there is a problem. You need to fix it by a certain time, and then the verification is there. This is a part of the reason that these visits actually happen only once a year for rating purposes. And there have been some concerns about, well, you might call us on a bad day, right? And there's really no resources, although I'll show you later, it's not very expensive, to actually go back and retest. But it's not any different from the restaurant catching the reviewer catching the restaurant on a bad day or anything like that. It's important that the problem is identified and that has been fixed. So how do we validate the operating criteria? Well, the first one, we contacted this Perlman to determine if the criteria are capable of measuring quality. This is the sort of the context quality. Is it capable of doing so? I think we are at the point of conducting that or concluding that part of the decision. I think, as Dr. Perlman said, it looks very promising. But the fact is, there needs to be ongoing sort of integrity to the process. That is the responsibility of the city. That's to ensure that we have the inter-rate reliability, we do annual retesting of the staff, and there's a need for ongoing training. You just can't get away from that. This is in the United States, they refer to it as a high stake. It doesn't seem to be such a high stakes issue in Toronto. Part of the problem is that the market, the childcare market in Toronto is extremely, I guess, not normal. Part of the problem is that there is much more demand than exists. I mean, you look at it, there's something like 3,000 infant spaces, licensed infant spaces, and the subsidy list alone has over 4,000 children on it for subsidy and almost as many for full fee paying parents. For every vacancy in the system, there's probably about 40 children waiting. That means that, that the operators actually can cut corners if they wish to. It could be quite profit-making enterprise. So it's a need to be continuously on top of that to monitor and regulate the quality. There are ongoing changes in the system, and that is where there's a real difference from research to something that's part of administration. There's ongoing clarification of language. We've recently developed interpretation guidelines for the preschool children, and the guidelines for other age groups are in place. There is additions and extensions in place or coming, and such as a new financial management section and the community integration section, which is just really being implemented and probably will change several times over the next few years. Also expansions to cover home child care and family resource program. I mean, the city is already talking how we're going to do the child and family centers. You know, I mean, that is ongoing work. You know, staffs have done and talked about how we would do the kindergarten programs, or in fact how we would do the extended day programs, because some of the requirements for those programs will be different than for normal preschool program. That presents a challenge for the researchers. So I shall not talk much about the benefits for children and families, because they should be obvious, but the fact is that families do get to choose. The city's website on purpose wasn't designed to show the, give me the 10 best preschool centers or give me the 10 worst infant centers, something like that. But in fact, that information you can get out of the web page yourself. We do see that families are in fact checking, but let's face it, the primary consideration of the family is location. Especially the kind of families that we support through the fee subsidies, the single mother with 2 kids. She cannot take the public transit across the city to a good childcare center. That, going back, is the motivation why we want to improve the quality of the care in the center so everybody will have access. Self-service providers, the tool originally started as a self-assessment tool. Right from the beginning, it was to help, again, the service provider to improve the quality of their service. It was like a checklist. Over the years, we added the children's services consultant, which is the staff that goes out to. They had to verify part of that checklist, and ultimately, I think we came to the conclusion the self-assessment is important. I mean, that's all reflective practice is all about, but it's not sufficient to do it, which is why we essentially moved in outside evaluation. That process, though, also allows the centers to start budgeting and start focusing on how they're going to improve. If the center comes and say, in next year I want to increase my budget because I want to spend more money on training, and it's supported by the operating criteria, it's much easier arguments to make. And obviously, Some programs are much better than others on self-promotions and use it very actively to say, see, we scored this much and we're better than others, or we're better than cities average. For the system benefit, certainly the accountability is really important, especially in these days of very tight funding. And being able to link quality to expenditure is very important. We also look forward to, the city looks forward to monitoring the effect of the upcoming changes. This is the impact of the full-day learning, and what everybody's familiar with, the huge base funding shortfalls that are going to get worse over the next few years. There is an important benefit to research. I think traditionally what happens in the actual delivery of the management program, there's some kind of mental connection to the research. You know, we've been told enough times what's good for children, but actually being able to prove it and to be able to affect your practice is much harder. This data, together with all the other data which the city possesses as an administrator, so we know all about expenditures, we know about costs, we know what the wages are paid in individual centers, we know about staff training, actually allows us to connect dots so we can start making decisions on how to manage the system. Even more importantly, and I think that we're going back a few years with research like the First Duty and so on, that we are able to connect the practice with the research. And you know, we're getting better at it. We're way ahead than we were 10 years ago, and hopefully this is only going to get better. But the richness of the database and the data is such that we're inviting researchers to come and use it. Again, on the city level, the feedback to the service planning and policy development and whenever the city can is trying to influence the provincial policy is really important. It is, sometimes people have soundproof minds of the province, but if you come with a hard facts and say this is what it is, as a sort of aside, nobody at the provincial level, I don't think, has a real idea how much it costs to deliver a child care space. What is the true cost of the space? We know. And this is only because there is a system that actually promotes accountability, and the quality is part of that. So what does it cost? Well, I've done this on my BlackBerry driving up from somewhere down south. But right now, there's about 650 centers that are part of the QA. This represents about 2,500 rooms. It's approximately 40,000 children. Just to be generous, I put 1.5 hours per room per assessment, which would translate to somewhere 3,750 hours per year. If you translate it into work years and say, I probably need 200 days a year because there's training, vacations, and so on. And if you're really well paid, staff well, and vacations and benefits, the cost works out to less than 3 cents a day per child. So how much cost is quality? I think the other thing, what is the cost of not doing quality? At $7.31 per year for something that, for infants, the true cost of that child care space is maybe $30,000 or something like that, is minuscule. Future challenge. And this is going back to the origin of criteria. The children's services consultant staff that currently are doing this evaluation, their primary job, again, is to support the center, to support the children and families. They're not their objective. They're not there to say, well, I don't care what the issue is. I don't care what you need. I don't care if you can get this. This is what you get. And so we asked them to one day a year to come into the center and essentially be extremely objective, and then the rest of the time to be supportive. I think this is something that's coming out of the research that city needs to work on to separate those functions. Much nicer challenge is incorporation of elect of the curriculum framework, which is something that's going to become mandatory in the city operating criteria, as well as extending the criteria to all childcare programs, as long as they're, right now it's programs that the city funds through childcare subsidies, but we have a council direction to expand first to anything that's got any kind of government funding, and finally anything that's actually delivered in the city. There is always methodological issues associated when you're dealing with administrative data and you try to use it for research, for policy development, and so on. That discussion is really important and needs to keep going on, because that's what actually improves the quality of the data. I know from past experience, just going back to the city staff and talking, we need to improve this, that kind of stuff will get very, very positive feedback, because they're already overworked. But you'd be amazed as how much little more rigor you can actually improve the quality of the assessment, quality of the data, and the usefulness of the data. So in conclusion, it is, and it has been the city's position, that formal standardized programs assessments are essential to the quality. This is part of the whole regulatory system. And I think our view always was that while the quality that happens inside that program, inside the room, but there's so much around it, whether it's the community we serve, the families we serve, and so on, that actually makes it important to be very inclusive. Self-assessments are important, but they're not sufficient to ensure program quality. That is, I think, clear. We've learned that. We learned that in the 80s and 90s, and we're not going back to that. And anybody out there who would think that sort of relying solely on the self-assessment and self-improvement that they're going to achieve and maintain high-quality programs is, I think, just fooling themselves. Quality assessment must be a transparent process. I think this is something that Dr. Perlman talked about. And finally, public access to information is important. Just because it gets done, it shouldn't sit in some drawer. And I think it's in everybody's benefit that data gets out there in such a way that helps us to improve programs, as opposed to help the real estate agents to search for the best community for people moving into the city. Although we do occasionally get requests, I'm moving from Halifax, which community has a good childcare I should move into. And usually, trying to be flippant, we say, well, maybe you should look at community which doesn't have a long waiting list. And finally, practically finally, we have to remember who the client is. Again, it's the children and families within the community. It's not the childcare program itself. Although we know a lot about who provides better care, we know all the relationship between the wages and the training and quality program, it's not, the program is still there to support the children and families. It's not because program is a business and you have to help those businesses, profit or non-profit, to survive. So that's about it. If you need more information, I would really encourage everybody to go to the city's website. The criteria is fully documented there, both in English and in French. I think there is somebody in the room who can tell you all about the French version of the programs. And it's much more coherent what you learn from the website than what you learn from me. And finally, If anybody's got any questions, you can find my email address on the bottom, and I will see what I can answer. Hope I haven't taken too much time.